Hey everyone, Anark here. How's everybody doing? Can everybody hear me? Testing, testing. Yeah, I'm sounding good. Nice. Cool. Okay. Yeah, we're doing it. First question, are you a nerd? I mean, yeah. Yeah, of course. Mm-hmm. The beard's coming in. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I mean, I told the TL, I said that's the shortest you're going to see this beard for a long time. I mean, wizard beard incoming. That's all I'm going to say. Question number one, what are your solutions to all the world's problems? Yeah, basically. Yeah. So I will be deferring the first serious questions to my Twitter feed. Last time I did not, and didn't even get through all of them, or rather gave myself a very long list of questions by first trying to address them side by side. No, that did not work out. We are going to exhaust the ones that were asked on Twitter first, and there were some very good ones. And then you know, if I've got time, I'll get around to the ones in chat. Last time that did not work out very well, but this time we're going to try our best to make it work. Okay, that's where we're at right now. All right. So, oh wow, yeah. Let's go find the thread. Wasn't very long ago. Okay, I already found it. Great. The one that's sorted to the top is, can you go on a long diversion about your views on ethical frameworks? I would really enjoy that. Tura, you are really trying to get us off track early. I gotta say, like that is does not seem like a feasible future for this stream. You know, we're gonna have to really, I think, prioritize our time a little better than allowing me to go off on a long-winded rant. Let's see here. Also, it looks like I need to really change the exposure because otherwise, oof. Okay, there we go. Okay, that's much better. Much better. All right. So I think we got everything all balanced out. Yeah, Tura's over here trying to get me to talk about like meta ethics or something. Which I think we all know how I feel about meta ethics. No, I'm just kidding. I don't think I've ever discussed meta ethics. Okay, so let's X that off. There we go. Boom. All right. I'm noticing there's a lot of H's here. I think I'm going to have to do myself an old ban. Put user in timeout. I might do a put user in timeout. Or rather, how about I ask first? BH, please stop typing H's into chat. We'll see if that works. Okay. So Hot Blasterbot asks, how's your spicy food tolerance? On a more serious note, any recommendations on contemporary anarcho-syndicalist theory or even current anarchist theory relating to worker cooperatives? Well, that's two questions. Okay, but that's fine. First one, how's my spicy food tolerance? Exceptionally high. That's all I'm going to say. I love spicy food. Pretty much every time I ever go to like a restaurant, I get the spiciest like level that they offer. That has only made my food inedible for me. Maybe once or twice ever. And I remember those events. So suffice to say, I've ordered a lot of maximum spicy food, and I love it. I can't get enough. I love like habaneros, and I love Indian food, super spicy curry and like tikka masala. Yeah, can't get enough. On a more serious note, any recommendations on contemporary anarcho-syndicalist theory or even current anarchist theory relating to worker cooperatives? So the thing about anarcho-syndicalist theory is, and I kind of discussed this last time, so I won't go really deep into it, but anarcho-syndicalism sort of evolved quite a bit since the big seminal texts in anarcho-syndicalism were written, or rather, you have basically Rudolf Rocker. And since that was written, not a whole lot of people have written like an updated, comprehensive analysis of where anarcho-syndicalism is at. So I don't know if there's any particular text that I would recommend people read about modern anarcho-syndicalism. I think Rudolf Rocker's anarcho-syndicalism theory and practice is probably a good place to start. But as for contemporary, not really sure. Current anarchist theory relating to worker cooperatives, you should read about Cooperation Jackson, 100%. Oh, hi, Sam. I just looked at the chat for that. So just so everybody knows, I'm barely looking at the chat right now. I'm mostly looking at the Twitter thread. Hi, Laura. How are you doing? You get a shout out on stream because Sam's a good friend of mine. That's how this works. Okay. It's all nepotism from here, basically. Okay, so back to the Twitter thread so that I can maybe actually address people's questions in chat. I should tell you, if you're asking questions in chat, I will probably never see them. You should definitely wait until I've finished with the Twitter thread if you want me to address these questions. But anyway, back to relating to worker cooperatives. I'm sure most people know that like Democracy at Work is doing a lot on worker cooperatives, but I really think the most radical form of worker cooperatives in the way that the way they could function as revolutionary vehicles is you do have to look at like Cooperation Jackson. They need to be confederated together with people's assemblies and neighborhood councils if they can have any hope of being revolutionary. Otherwise, they'll just 100% capitulate to the market. So on to the next one. Will you take responsibility for the war crimes you committed in Yugoslavia under the name Waldo? Yes, absolutely. I mean, that's me, Waldo. See, I got to say, since this joke was created, since the Waldo joke was created, I feel like I'm looking a lot less Waldo right now. Really, it's just the beard is coming out. And I think I'm really going away from the Waldo look, Let's see here. I don't have the beanie. I don't have the just saying. I mean, the shaved face, no stripes. But you guys keep it up. Let's see here. What's your opinion on anarcho-syndicalism in the sense of having a big anarchist trade union and a parallel anarchist specific organization like the CNTFAI? Is it still relevant? Yeah, I mean, in a general sense, anarcho-syndicalism is always going to be relevant, like insofar as that you are trying to do union organizing. Obviously, horizontal trade unions are one of the best ways you could do mass union organizing, right? I mean, the trade union is a way for us to confederate our individual unions such that they apply to the trade at hand, such that the people who are experts in that trade are able to direct the confederation of unions. So that's a strong idea, no matter like until capitalism is abolished. That's a good way to approach mass scale unionization efforts. The question is really whether the union has this revolutionary potential that people have put into it. And that's another question entirely. I think certainly by itself, it does not. Revolutionary trade unionism, if viewed as a narrow project, I just do not think is feasible as a revolutionary vehicle. Now, as part of a broader project is maybe an integral part of doing so. So revolutionary trade unionism, horizontal anarchist revolutionary trade unionism, of course, it's still relevant. In fact, you can see that it's catching on in a lot of places that have not gone through the full modern arc of neoliberalism. Take, for example, like Bangladesh, where anarcho-syndicalism is coming back, and a variety of other places I've heard. So yes, anarcho-syndicalism is always going to be relevant, but by itself, I do not think that it's a revolutionary project. It has to be expanded to include, you know, council structures and neighborhood councils and accountability to the masses. So that's my perspective. Yeah, is it still relevant today? Yeah, that's my feeling on it. Do you think we could develop a stock activism thing like what happened with GameStop, but from a perspective to make trouble on corporate profits? I have to say, I'm not saying that like what is being done to GameStop is not a good thing overall. I mean, I'm glad to see, or I mean, you know, the GameStop buying up GameStop super high as to undermine the shorts that a bunch of hedge funds have created. That's super smart. It's clever. The problem is it requires considerable amount of money and mass coordination by the market actors. And I don't think that the left should really be involving itself extensively in market manipulation as a tactic. Now, don't get me wrong. I'm not saying that there's not some limited usage to it. I mean, as we can see, it's really hurting some particular hedge funds since they've carried it out in this way. I just don't think that it's a tactic that, like, you know, as the left, as people who are trying to abolish the stock market, especially, that we should be using the tool of speculation in order to attack our enemy, because that's the enemy's tool. And if the time comes that they just want to suspend, you know, or suppress aspects of the stock market in order to stop us, there's a pretty decent chance they will. And unlike other tactics, as soon as they suppress our particular market manipulation, you know, for the masses, they don't care if you know, hedge funds manipulate the market. But as soon as they are able to stop that, there's nothing left to that tactic. The tactic can be deregulated out of existence, I guess is what I'm trying to say. You can't deregulate a militia out of existence. You can't deregulate a neighborhood council out of existence, right? You can't deregulate a radical union out of existence. You can make it harder for them to exist, but that tactic will remain regardless of state suppression and is in fact meant to resist state suppression. So I wouldn't say we should rely in any way on this tactic in a more general sense. What is your opinion on anarchists reading authoritarian leftist theory like Lenin, Stalin, and Mao? Do you think there's any benefit to it? Actually, no. I know that it's really this like popular thing to be like, well, you know, people should read the authoritarian leftists in order to like understand their ideas. Their ideas don't have a lot of validity. I mean, that's the truth of the matter, in my opinion. I don't think it's really a good use of your time to read authoritarian leftist literature. Most of the time, it's highly deceptive, filled with logical fallacies, fantastical thinking. It's impractical. It recreates state capitalism. Learning what you learn from authoritarian leftist theories is practically useless. And wherever it is not useless, it can be found better elsewhere. So if you, some people read, State and Revolution, you should read State and Revolution to see what's in it. Not really, no. I mean, the only valuable things that are in State and Revolution are all found in anarchist theory and even contemporary libertarian socialist theory. State and Revolution is a waste of your time. Reading any authoritarian leftist theory, if you're actually trying to gain anything other than like rhetorical, like understanding your opponent's position so you can tear it down, then yeah, I mean, I guess. But if you're trying to learn anything, it has nothing really valuable to teach. So do I think there's any benefit to it? Only if you're attempting to understand your opponent well enough to tear them down. Like, you know, I've read quite a few different authoritarian leftist texts, and I'm just here to tell you, I learned nothing of any value other than that they had no idea what they were talking about. Like they were idealists about the state. They believe fantastical nonsense about how history plays out, how actual economic transformation and social transformation takes place. They have highly reduced versions of what were originally very complex analytical methods like dialectics. They've reduced into vulgar, useless versions of themselves. I think it's only persuasive if their tone intimidates you and you're like, oh man, they talk shit about anarchists without, you know, oh man, it's like really getting to me, this sort of demeaning tone that they use. If like that that might be the only way I think that it should be convincing to a well-read anarchist. I will respond just to somebody here in chat who says, what about Marx? I do not consider Marx an authoritarian leftist. I consider Marx far closer to every anarchist than he was to any authoritarian leftist. Literally the least authoritarian leftist is further, the least authoritarian leftist is further from Marx than Marx is from any anarchist, in my opinion. Anyway. Onwards. Yeah, somebody responded to them saying it's no different than reading The Art of War. I disagree. Art of War is actually valuable and includes insights that can be used. Authoritarian leftist theory is nearly useless and has a unanimously failed track record. What are your thoughts on affinity groups, dual power, mutual aid, food sovereignty? I mean, each of those kind of needs a different answer. The easiest one, foods, or I'll start backwards. So food sovereignty, very good, absolutely integral. In fact, if we don't have food sovereignty under any sort of a time of rupture, okay, it's going to be very difficult for us to actually defend ourselves, to maintain autonomy and dignity as a people that are trying to weather this difficult transition into a new society. It's going to be very difficult if we don't have food sovereignty, because we're not going to be able to feed ourselves. Okay, we can seize large amounts, but that's literally saying you need to be successful in seizing large amounts, and it's like, probably it's just a good idea to have a base to provide yourself with so that you can undergo war without requiring that you defeat your enemy and take all their means of production in order to sustain yourself. I think that that's infeasible. So food sovereignty, integral, must be done. Mutual aid, once again, it's the same thing again. Mutual aid develops the structures which are going to allow us to weather a time of rupture and to transition into another world. Okay. So mutual aid is establishing the economic foundations, is establishing the social relations, which are going to sustain the autonomous body representing our revolution in the time of rupture as we move towards, a different form of society. Dual power pretty much just includes those other two things. Just understand that everything I was saying there about all those other things is obviously just true of dual power, right? Like that's just writ large dual power, what I'm saying there. Affinity groups is kind of a different topic. Affinity groups, insofar as that what we mean by affinity groups is small groups of anarchists that are generally a little more informal, but that they have high ideological agreement, and they act on a tactical unity of sorts based on that. I mean, those can be good. Those can be valuable. I've been part of affinity groups, and those affinity groups have been effective in some occasions. What I will say is, insofar as what is meant by an affinity group is a highly informal group, I think that has a limited use. And I think informal organizations, even though they can work at times, should not be our standard. We should not be attempting to create a revolutionary, we should not be moving towards the revolution by making informal groups. We are not going to dismantle the mega machine through informal groups. We are not going to prefigure the world of tomorrow by completely informal or with completely informal mechanisms of organizing and communicating and settling issues. I have also seen it go bad insofar as there wasn't a process that had been agreed to by the group. But that's all about what you mean by affinity group, right? I mean, affinity group could have an internal democratic structure, in my opinion. So. Let's continue here. How do we deal with the fact that mainstream and radical leftists alike have their hopes and energies drained by electoralism? Well, I got to admit, right now, I find it very peculiar there are still people focusing on electoralism. It's mind-blowing to me that we just saw such an ideal scenario for leftist electoralism in America play out, and everybody saw how miserably it blew up in our faces. Okay, how badly it turned out, how ineffective that the electoral program was as it was carried out, and that there are still people who are anarchists or libertarian socialists that are still thinking that's a viable method. to me is quite befuddling. I got to be honest. I really do not see how it has significant value. In our best case scenario, it already failed. I don't know why people are still thinking about wasting their time trying to get politicians elected instead of actually building power for ourselves. Okay, like if Bernie Sanders had won, maybe we'd be in a different state of the argument, right? Maybe I'd be arguing for like libertarian municipalist tactics, right? Where you like mix dual power building with electoralism. But given the failure that is just played out in front of our eyes, I think we've seen that this is just not a viable tactic. And historically, it has never been viable. There's never been an example where electoralism is what led to the building of dual power. If anything, it seems to be the process of electoralism really just sets you up so that your allies will betray you later. That seems to be its historical repetitive cycle. So that's what I think about electoralism. I think that, it's our job as anarchists to present to people the practical reasons, not just in like the ideological reasons why they should oppose electoralism, which are sometimes sufficient, but instead actually just helping them understand the practical reasons why it doesn't work and why it actually doesn't help us, and pointing to historical example, showing the repetitiveness of this failed tactic. Okay. So I think it's partially on anarchists to help people understand why the tactic failed and demonstrate the practical underlying reasons why it doesn't work and cannot work. What's my favorite food? I mean, it's weird, but I think it's chips and salsa. That I know that sounds weird. I fucking love chips and salsa. I love some spicy ass habanero salsa, like lime chips, the lime hinted chips. I can't get enough. It's unhealthy. It's bad. Okay. But I mean, insofar you're talking about real meals, not like, snacks pretending to be meals as my entire life is. I love like Indian food. I love Mexican food. I love like street tacos, tikka masala, curry. Those are some of my favorite things. What's my favorite music? I think like most people in the modern era, like my music tastes are diverse, but lately I've been the bands that I keep returning to are mostly like post-punk bands like Proto-Martyr, Parquet Courts. But I've been listening to all kinds of different stuff. I also love like SZA and Frank Ocean and stuff like that. So, yeah, I mean, I'm into all kinds of stuff. What are your thoughts on Anarcho Pacificsm? I respect them as allies, and I seek to integrate them into a holistic strategy which can bring us all towards liberation. But I do not think that a movement which is anarcho-pacifist could possibly succeed in undergoing a revolutionary juncture. And that's not to say, once again, that anarcho-pacifists can't be part of the project of undergoing that revolutionary juncture. But I don't think that if our whole movement were anarcho-pacifist, that we would have any chance of succeeding. I think that even a militant pacifism is insufficient to build the structures that are needed. And once again, they're allies, but I don't want a whole movement of anarcho-pacifists, that's for sure. What are some good tips for trying to organize one's own neighborhood or local community? Well, it really depends on your community, right? So everything is going to be highly conditional. I would say the things that hold true for pretty much any community is that you need to figure out what issues concern them, and then you need to figure out how that you can build the structures that are going to help alleviate those concerns. Okay. And that the reason I say that that's like highly contingent is because, if you go around and you like knock doors or whatever, trying to figure out what the concerns of your community are, and they tell you, I hate those Mexicans down the street, like that's going to be a problem, right? Like that's going to be an issue. You don't want to build a structure to help them undergo, fixing that problem, right? But what that might do is key you in that what you need to be doing is anti-racist, pro-immigration or anti-fascist talking points. You need to be disseminating knowledge such that viewpoint is harder to hold, right? So I would say, there's kind of different stages, right? Stage number one, when you're trying to make the soil fertile, is going to be a process of popular education. Okay, what you're really trying to do is find the means by which you can convey the theory that is needed for people to understand their conditions. Okay, and you need to emphasize educating the people about the issues that either are sticking points for that community or that this community needs to know in order to move forward. Those are the things you should focus on. Find out where your community really is at. Okay. Now, if you're like most places, you're probably going to have a community that's like mixed, all kinds of different groups, right? So take where I live. I live in Tulsa, Oklahoma. On the north side of Tulsa are mostly Black communities that are generally lower income. Now, you could, for example, focus on those communities instead of trying to like bail out like the white middle class or whatever in your community. It may be more feasible to just go organize with people who already know society sucks because society is mistreating them, right? Starting with the people who are worst off is generally a very strong strategy when you are attempting to build a coalition, because if you can help the people at the bottom first, you not only do you alleviate the most suffering at once, quite possibly, but you also build a new coalition of the oppressed, right? Your new coalition is now stronger. It is unified. You've demonstrated you actually care about the issues that are involved instead of just telling them you care about the issues involved like a liberal does, right? So that's kind of like some of the things I would say, but that question is just way too big for me to conceivably answer in a short period of time. So yeah. Let's see here. Do you support school abolition for the affirmation of the free association of individuals desiring education and individuals who have knowledge and are willing to share it with people who want to voluntarily learn? Yeah, of course. Insofar as what is meant by the abolition of school, and I think generally when most of us say that, what we mean is the abolition of a highly coercive, hierarchical learning environment. I feel like anybody who has been through academia should know that that is what needs to be done. I don't understand how there are leftists that don't understand this. It kind of blows my mind that there are people arguing. There are leftists going, we oppose the extreme disciplinization of the workplace and the alienation of the workers from the means of production because they don't have control over that environment. So then clearly by being alienated from it, they are made miserable. And so we should want to reduce that. And then for some reason you're like, cool, well, most of that is pretty true of the school environment. And in fact, it seems to be worse for students when they can't engage with their own learning and decide the path forward. And people are like, I've seen others making this and they're like, Anark kitty, that face when 12 years old and you got an F on your test, and it's like, you guys are fucking ridiculous, right? Like this used to be the standard position of radical leftists. There was not a controversy in the last wave of revolution that the school system was a unnecessarily hierarchical, coercive structure. The same thing with the family, which also similar nonsense talking points get pushed towards it. So, yeah, I obviously support abolishing the school, especially in that form, right? Insofar as what's meant is like the replacement with like the Scuola Modernas, like Francisco Ferrer, right? That's exactly what I want. What if I threw an apple into an active Large Hadron Collider? My impression is that nothing really significant would happen. Probably the collider would just like shut down because something was wrong. I think it would probably like blow a hole through the apple, but I don't think you'd get anything really crazy happening. I think you'd just blow a hole through the apple or destroy, or the apple might even explode. But I don't think that, like some explosion or something would happen. It'd be like, you just get a lot of pressure built up. I think there's been an example of like somebody who I don't think it's like they stuck their head in it, but like something got stuck in a large hadron, or not the Large Hadron Collider, but in a collider, and something, I think it did something like that. It like blew a hole in it, which is what we would expect it to do. Okay, I feel like, I feel like though anarchist YouTubers like yourself and Anarcho-Pac reach more and more people, very few of them actually get organized in anarchist organizations and strengthen the movement. Do you feel so as well? And if yes, how can that be changed? I should say myself, at least, I am involved in organizing. I've been involved in organizing since 2011. So I've been doing it for about 10 years. So, you know, insofar as that's in reference to me, I organize, and have been for a while. Insofar as it's kind of like just in reference to the YouTube community at large, well, I mean, I'm just going to advocate everybody organize as much as they can, right? I mean, everybody's got their limitations and their strengths, and obviously, you know, certain people aren't going to be able to organize in the same way as others. You know, especially people who have disabilities. But insofar as that anybody can locate a way that they can organize, be part of an organization, help an organization, I think that they should be, insofar as those are anarchist or libertarian socialist organizations, right? Yeah. So, yeah. And I know, by the way, Zoe also organizes. I know Zoe is part of, I don't know if how active Zoe is, but I know that Zoe is part of Black Rose, at least if I recall correctly. What's the best method of fighting the subjugated consciousness of the population? That's an interesting question. Yeah, I kind of addressed this a little bit in the video Power, talking about philosophies of justification. And I think this is part of the reason why it's really important. That popular education aspect is really important. It's not only really, not only really important at the beginning when you're attempting to create fertile soil for your movement to grow, it's also really important at all stages of the process. Like, there's no stage of the process where revolutionaries can just stop being educated. You want to always be further educating people. Now, you know, as I said previously, certain people that's not going to be as possible for. Not everybody needs to be a theory nerd, and so on and so on and so on. But insofar as that you can drive people towards consuming the ideas which are going to, you know, dismantle authoritarian thinking, that are going to bring people towards more liberatory viewpoints, that's something you should be trying to encourage more people to do every day. This very peculiar thing where leftists are like, people, you know, don't need to read theory. Don't worry about trying to get people to read theory. It's like, people don't need to read theory in the technical sense. Like, everybody and anybody could figure this out by doing it. It just probably is going to take a little bit longer, and it's probably going to be through process of trial and error, which is inherently more dangerous and more volatile. So you should be trying to encourage people to read theory. What theory? Well, that's up to you and that person, and it needs to be adjusted to their circumstances and to their level of engagement and to what you think that they are in the right place to learn. But the one thing I just want to note is, you know, like, we have this tendency of acting like the average person is stupid. Okay. Like, they can't understand it, man. It's like, it's too much for their feeble, you know, normie brains. And it's like, I just want to point out that people in impoverished countries who could barely read memorized Capital back in the day. Okay. Like, people would sit there, like people that had very little formal education would sit there with like a dictionary and Capital, trying for hours and hours and hours to understand it. And in fact, doing so, actually understanding it. So I kind of dislike this idea that people say, like, you know, don't worry about people reading theory. I think theory is one of the best ways to dismantle the philosophies of justification which underpin our society. Same person, Tony Pancake, says, what are some of the immediate issues that new anarchist groups can take up, fight, and not dissolve when they encounter apparent impossibility? I will say that's pretty well summarized, in my opinion, in Constructing the Revolution. But what are the immediate issues? I think that's going to, as I said earlier, it's going to depend upon your circumstances. It's going to depend on the places you are. It's going to depend on the things that concern the people there. Okay. So, for example, if the community that you're in or the community you're attempting to organize is mostly illegal immigrants, then what you need to be doing is trying to focus around that issue, right? You need to be like doing brake light clinics. You need to be going to the events where they educate people about these problems. You need to be actually figuring out the vectors that dissolve that oppression or protect them at least from the power structures as they stand at the moment, which might involve creating community defense organizations, which then means that you're helping them confederate into militias and create people's assemblies and so on. So it's going to very much depend on your circumstances. I don't think that they're the only single unifying principle that can bring all of the oppressed peoples together is opposition to hierarchies of power. But that is very broad, and hierarchies of power manifest themselves in different ways depending upon the circumstances. And those circumstances, therefore, will be highly dependent on the people who are there, and what's happening to them. Okay. So you have to be sensitive to the conditions of your environment in order to properly organize the people. How important is a steady stream of victory to a social cause, and what can be done to alleviate the disinterest and disintegration that comes from hitting a wall of impassivity? So this is I kind of didn't answer the second part of the previous question, and so this kind of goes towards it. I don't know that you absolutely have to have a steady stream of victory, but if you stop attaining any victories, it is almost always very discouraging to any organization, formal, informal, doesn't matter. It's very discouraging to continually feel like you're losing. What I will say is there's one thing that I would impart to anybody who is experiencing the feeling as if nothing is happening. I have learned one really core lesson in the last 10 years of organizing. And that is, much of the time when you feel like your work is shouting into the void, that it is making no difference and is changing nothing, you see no impact in front of you, or rather it looks like you see no impact. Okay. Much of that has an enormous effect. You think it doesn't, but it often has a way bigger effect than you could ever imagine. Okay. So for example, let me give an example. The other day I was talking about somebody in Rojava, or talking with somebody who was in Rojava, and was talking about how anarchism is getting bigger in Rojava, even though, obviously Bookchin's thought is what really predominates. And I was asking, I was like, that's interesting. What led to that? What conditions led to that? And they said the key that they seemed to be able to locate was that back during the Arab Spring, Occupy was one of the only international organizations of organizers that was continually showing their solidarity towards the people attempting to overthrow their governments. Now we could talk about, how the Arab Spring turned out and what began it and so on, right? But what they said was that encouraged a lot of people in those places to begin reading about anarchist theory, because Occupy was associated with anarchist theory. They said, who are these people abroad that actually care about us? And it turned out it was anarchists. And so they said, well, then maybe I should just learn a little bit about anarchism. These people are supporting us and overthrowing our governments. We're not getting this kind of support from a bunch of authoritarian leftists. So then, let's go research it, right? And so now, and I remember back in Occupy, when I was doing it, all we did was we did a solidarity, a short video in solidarity. We took pictures of us with a banner saying solidarity with various countries that were in the Arab Spring. But I remember feeling as if it wasn't a highly effective tactic. I was kind of like, I'm not sure I understand. I didn't gripe about it, but I remember thinking, is this effective? Does this have a purpose? It kind of feels like I'm shouting into the void. Well, now here I am 10 years later being told that the fact that Occupies did that in mass had a huge effect and literally changed the ideology of people in other nations. Okay. So it is very difficult to actually know the impact of your actions when you're doing them. And it is very easy to convince yourself that everything is worthless and meaningless, okay? That it doesn't matter, like, oh man, I gotta only do things that have like maximum instant impact that I can see and I can notice. That, honestly, worst track record. It seems like it gets a lot less done. Thinking in the long term seems to be what transforms people's minds. So that's one thing I would encourage. Having the long-term view, understanding your actions matter, even when it feels like they often don't. They often ring out in ways you do not expect. So what is your ID on your what is your ID on your Antifa membership card? I want to friend you on Antifa book. I'll send it right over to you. Number one, have you read Desert? And if yes, what's your opinion? I have not read Desert. I pretty well know what's in it. My opinion is that any ideology which tells you that all is lost, stop struggling, is engaging in fortune telling, and you should reject it. You should reject pessimism just as much as you reject optimism. They are both naive, faith-based mentalities. Nobody knows the future. Anybody telling you that they know the future is selling you snake oil, and that includes the nihilist just as much as the believer in the progressive teleology that the arc of history is long, but it bends towards justice, right? They're both delusional. Okay, the only difference is the pessimist is telling you something so negative that you think it sounds like they're being realistic, and they rely on that. They think that brutally negative things must be realistic because it's hard to accept. Well, there's no reason why we should accept that we are guaranteed to fail. There's no proof. Nobody has some, revelation of the future such that they know with certainty that we cannot win or that we are guaranteed to win. And so I find, and this is not, I get it. They still want to struggle, but to struggle without a conception of a future goal, to just try to do pure negation, is to itself be unable to do pure negation. You cannot do pure negation by simply opposing the system as it stands. You have to actually build a system which countervails it. Otherwise, all you do is create a vacuum, and really you've just made it easy for a new tyrant to sneak in. And don't get me wrong, I'm not saying the insurrection is bad. And I'm also not saying don't sometimes just accelerate, because it does help sometimes. But a purely deconstructive project is pretty much always wrong. And I'm talking about philosophically, I'm talking about politically, in any capacity. A fully deconstructive project, a project that has no component of construction, is almost always self-refuting and really doesn't have to be taken seriously. It almost always refutes itself. So yeah, I haven't read Desert, so maybe if any of that was off base, I apologize. But I have read other anarcho-nihilism. I've read Blessed is the Flame. I will be talking a lot more at length about this in the next video. So let's see here. Oh, number 2, same person. Do you think anarchists should focus more on youth liberation, considering how so many people, even within Marxist and anarchist communities, have no problem with oppressing children? I mean, we definitely should be having the discussions more often. The problem seems to be that we got a bunch of tough guys around here who you can't have the discussion with because they've internalized authoritarian ideology, and they think that, because children don't know as much about the world, you should treat them as lesser. They deserve to be dominated. And it's like, don't get me wrong, children need guidance. Children need their parents to help them understand the world, because they enter without the knowledge of how things are. But acting like that means that adults should just get to treat children as if fundamentally lesser beings, or beings that don't deserve respect and dignity, is very damaging, and setting up the structures such that we justify the power of adults over young people in such a way that there's no critical thinking, where it is a unerring mentality that just trusts the maturity of adults, is not only nonsense, but it's authoritarian. It's a damaging the power hierarchy, which does indeed have to be dismantled. And this is another one of those where the last wave of revolutionaries, this was not controversial. Okay, this was not controversial. Authoritarian or anarchist, we pretty much all agreed that the family structure was damaging and imbued capitalist logics. The atomic family structure, that doesn't have any connection to extended family or no connection to its community, that was seen as like this little contained compartment, was damaging. That was dangerous. We all understood that last wave. This time, once again, we got all these tough guys around where they're like, well, I wouldn't want to dismantle all the hierarchies of power. It's like, anyway, yes, youth liberation is important. Are you considering reading more on American anarchists like Declare after hearing about her understanding of how crime is socially caused? I mean, I will end up reading more Declare, and probably if I ever do a video more about crime and the concept of justice, I would probably speak about her a little bit more. Reading more American anarchists. I've read Berkman. I've read Goldman. Then, if you would consider, I would consider Bookchin an anarchist. I'm currently reading Ecology of Freedom. Will I read more? Yeah, I mean, I'm never going to stop reading probably. Is democracy contradictory to anarchism? No, my impression is it's not. Now, it kind of depends on what you mean by democracy, though. If what you mean by democracy is parliamentary democracy, a democratic republic, a liberal democracy, representative democracy, yeah, that's all antithetical to anarchism. Yeah. If that's what you mean, then of course, anarchism is a negation of that. Those are all highly hierarchical ways to structure society. And anarchism is in opposition to the representative republic. Electing representatives is just electing your rulers. So yeah, but if what is meant by democracy is just a system by which people vote, or a system by which it looks for, majority, some amount of a majority of opinion to approve proposals and move forward with actions. No, democracy is not inherently bad. Now, once again, what if you're defining democracy as majoritarianism? Okay, well, then I would say there are fair critiques to be made there. And we would seek to create we would have to find consensus, right? That's the solution to majoritarianism. But it should be said, even historical anarchists used some forms of majoritarianism when decisions were hard to make. There was just some assumption that, people in the organizations were willing to go along with decisions they may disagree with because it helped the group stay coherent. It helped everybody move forward together. So even some forms of majoritarianism, as long as there was no representation, but it was all delegation, were used in historical anarchist movements, even the ones that we model ourselves after. So it's not to say that even majoritarianism doesn't have its place, but we should be seeking to avoid majoritarianism as much as possible. We should be trying to always embed consensus systems. And I'm always of the sort where I'm not trying to shy away from consensus as things get larger. I just want to be clever about how consensus is implemented. In After the Revolution, I lay out a super majoritarian directly democratic system, or rather, it is a consensus democracy that has a fallback onto super majoritarianism. I think that's feasible. And I think that it is in some ways more robust than even what some historical anarchist groups have done. So what place do you think platformism has in the anarchist movement? It should be said, I call myself platformist or Especefismo these days. So clearly I think that it has an important place. I think platformism or Especefismo are the most modern, updated anarchist praxis. I think that it basically has taken the best from all of the previous occasions that anarchists have had to learn from, and it creates it into a fully coherent version of anarchist organizing principles. So yeah, do I think I think platformism is what every anarchist should be studying, but more specifically also Especefismo. So if you want to study platformism, I recommend reading some Machno. On Revolutionary Unity is a good one to start with. There's also like the Bulgarian platformist, which Zoe has done a wonderful video. I know that Non-Compete was displeased with her video, but regardless of how you feel about all that, the video that Zoe did on platformism is probably the best primer on platformism that you will find. I think that there's probably no superior resource out there to understanding platformism. Okay, next one. I like Bookchin's and Öcalan's focus on ecology as necessary to liberation, but I don't think it goes far enough in regards to the urgent need for ecological revolution given climate change. Seeing as how we only have a few decades to mitigate the very worst effects. So, one, do you think that assessment is fair? And two, are you aware of someone who does have a roadmap for global ecological revolution that's feasible in our time? What do we do to keep the goddamn nihilistic capitalists from running this thing into the ground? God has like 5 questions. Okay. I don't know if you, I don't know if there's, you know, if you consider Bookchin has to be taken in stages. Okay. So if what you consider Bookchin is only late Bookchin and you're talking about libertarian municipalism here, then, I mean, maybe you could call it gradualist. You know, it has conceptions of electoralism, which I think are foolish, but it advocates dual power building, which is inherently, in my opinion, not a gradualist position. It's almost accelerationist in a way, because you're building these structures and they're going to be threatening the other power structures, and that's going to invite them to attack you, in which case you're probably going to need to defend yourself and so on. So I don't know if I would say that, you know, I don't know necessarily what you're referring to in saying it doesn't go far enough in regards to the urgent need for ecological revolution. I mean, it seems to me that Rojava is very, very urgently present, right? Rojava currently exists and is enacting ecological transformations. Are you aware of someone who does have a roadmap? I mean, I don't think you can build a perfect roadmap. I mean, it's good to do strategic analysis, but I guess the long and short of it is no, I haven't seen somebody do that roadmap, but also it seems like it's going to be pretty contingent on your area to some significant degree. I would say insofar as what actually has to happen, we have to have power before any ecological transformation can take place. So, you know, that's step number 1. Next thing that's got to be done, dual power. So, thoughts on Murray Bookchin and social ecology? Love Murray Bookchin, love social ecology. Ecology of Freedom, absolutely transformational. The more Bookchin I read, the more I love Bookchin. Yes, I disagree with him on some things, but it doesn't matter. He is one of the most important theorists to literally ever write. He is, in many ways, the most important theorist of the modern era. And I mean that. I mean that in an entirely sincere way. Everybody should read Bookchin. Bookchin is not just a riff on previous leftist theory. He's not just kind of expanding a little bit or re-explaining anarchism to you. Bookchin is truly taking a new, fresh vision of revolutionary struggle that is fully informed and reconstructed at its very foundations by the concepts of ecological harmony, complementarity, the expansion of intentionality, dignity and control by the people. I think everybody should read Bookchin, and I would highly recommend, if you're a theory nerd of any caliber, that you read Ecology of Freedom. People always tell you read this or read that first. Truthfully, if you kind of already, if you were the type of person who would even consider reading like Capital by Marx, Ecology of Freedom is quite a bit easier to consume than Capital. Okay, so the idea that people would be like, you know, would try to read Capital and be scared of Ecology of Freedom seems very peculiar to me. But yeah, read it carefully, read it slowly, read it thoroughly, because it's a dense book and he has a lot of thoughts. I would say 98, 95, 98% of what Bookchin is saying is integral Like it is absolutely necessary that we understand what Bookchin is saying. It's not, in my opinion, it's not a matter of opinion. You just have to understand what he is saying and it really internalize this perspective that he is offering and understand his expertise in the subject matter. And you're going to see the value of this book. It's very valuable. What should the left's reaction be in the wake of the upcoming failures of the Biden administration? I mean, obviously, you need to point out that what the failures of electoralism is. You need to, if people want to, they should push Biden. But I leave that mostly up to the Social Democrats. I think I am becoming more and more disconnected from electoral politics and care less and less about what takes place in them as every day goes by, because I realize that without dual power, none of it matters. Okay. So the job of anarchists and libertarian socialists is at this moment to stop concerning themselves with electoralism and to fully devote themselves to building organizations, building dual power, creating power for the people. Okay. And I mean it when I say it is incredibly important that there are council structures underpinning everything we build. Okay. Just building a cooperative, not enough. Just building a militia, not enough. Okay. None of that is enough unless it is integrated into council structures, because the council structures are the beltway between the masses and control of any given body. So what I would say is what we should be doing in every occasion is building neighborhood councils, doing popular education. Don't worry about Biden. The Social Democrats are gonna let the Social Democrats and the electoralists worry about Biden. Okay. Start trying to find ways that you can spread the ideas of anarchism. Start trying to find ways that you can build power where you are at. Try to find other anarchists, try to reach out, try to create more anarchists. Opinion on the Greek anarchist movement. I mean, I support them in their struggle. I won't pretend to know everything about the Greek anarchist movement. I do know they have both contingents. They have a little more of an insurrectionary contingent and a little more of a social anarchist contingent. I don't know how well they get along. I've heard conflicting things. I do know that the squatters movement in Greece, in Exarchia, has been highly effective and has kept the state out of that area for an extended period of time. Last I heard, it still exists, and they've continued to maintain their autonomy. So the Greek anarchist movement gives us some very good examples on how to carry out urban tactics. And might I add, it'd probably be very good to do case studies of how anarchism spread so prolifically in Greece as it has now. Thoughts on this beauty, and then they post what's looking like some good food. Yeah, that looks good. I'm into that. Yeah, there you go. Thoughts on CBT? You mean cock and ball torture? Oh, sorry, cognitive behavioral therapy. Gotcha. Okay. Yeah, cognitive behavioral therapy. I won't pretend to know enough about it to comment. Yeah, I don't know enough about the subject. Thoughts on Stirner, and also, have you read Freddie Perlman? I've not read Freddie Perlman. My thoughts on Stirner, I am skeptical of egoism, no matter what kind, basically. I'm skeptical of ethical egoism. I'm skeptical of philosophical egoism, or metaphysical egoism, or political egoism, or any. I don't think that constructing one's view about how reality works, starting from what individuals desire, or I just think that's always. It's not to say you don't want to take into account what people desire, but you should not, your foundation for how a system functions and your justifications for why you are doing things, starting them from a person's own ego or from their own subjective desires, I think pretty much always leads to a bad interpretive framework. Not to say always. Spinoza did a decent job, and don't get me wrong, Stirner created a more social ethos starting from those principles. I just think that if you keep rooting back, and if your justification is always benefit of the self, well, benefit of the self may very well come into conflict with the community. And it kind of depends on if you want to side with the community or you want to side with the individual. And it seems to me like a lot of the misunderstanding, or a lot of the conflict that happens between the individualist anarchists and the social anarchists is because the social anarchists don't want any imposition on the individual. Whereas the social anarchists recognize, or the individualist anarchists don't want any imposition on the individual. Whereas social anarchists recognize some imposition on the individual is good, or is worth it if the individual has their freedoms expanded, if all of society becomes richer and better for it. You know, that's essentially long and short of it. I could get into ethics, and I don't want to get into all that. I know Stirner justifies a more social conception of the egoist framework. I get it. I'm not saying that like Stirner is the enemy or anything, and I haven't read Stirner, so there you go. But I do plan on reading Stirner, so it's not as if I'm like opposed to it or something. I'm not an individualist anarchist. There you go. That's the long and short of what I just said. What are your thoughts on things like council communism when compared to anarcho-syndicalism? In my experience, council communism, I used to wonder what were the differences between council communism and anarcho-syndicalism. And then I started reading some Pannekoek, and I don't understand how nobody was able to understand that the answer to that question appears to be council communism is very economically reductionist. You read what Pannekoek's criticism of anarchism is mostly really bad straw men, but where it is not a straw man, what he's saying is you care about all these other hierarchies of power. And it's all about the economy, bro. Class reductionism 101. Everything's the means of production. That's what you stupid anarchists don't understand. It's all about the means of production. The development of the means of production naturally creates the next stage of history. Oh my God, you silly anarchists. How do you not get it? And it's like, kind of worthless. I mean, don't get me wrong, council communism is good. I think it's a good tendency for people to have. I'd prefer people were council communists than authoritarian leftist, but it seems to me council communism is kind of just a weaker anarchism. It's essentially like you were a Marxist and you recognized that, oh man, Marx, we need a more libertarian reading of all of this. We need to kind of return to a Marx that understands the organic Marx, that understands the original Marx, the Marx that had an understanding of a perception of the human condition as it stood and cared about the human condition. And they're like, okay, cool, let's do that. So what do we got to do? Prefiguration, bottom up power, horizontal council structures. And it's like, so what you're saying is you discovered you were an anarchist, but you don't know anything about anarchism. Okay, gotcha. Understood. But yeah, no, unity with left comms, not Bordigists though. Fuck Bordiga. To Godzilla or King Kong, Godzilla shoots lasers. There you go. To what extent are trade unions adequate vehicles for, I kind of already answered this one. More broadly, should anarchists focus on building workerist or community forms of democracy? Yeah, I pretty much addressed this. I think that any conception that any conception of prefiguring the future world, which only thinks of the economic conditions, that only thinks about economics, tries to build everything around a conception of economics, is fundamentally incapable of building a revolution. The revolution is not only about economics, and that has been demonstrated time and time again at this point. But I also don't see, so workerism is just bad overall. Okay, just there you go. That's my perspective on that. Who would win in a fist fight? Let's see. Oh, that was a poll. Okay, who would win in a fist fight? Marx, Stalin, Lenin, or Bakunin? I don't know. I don't think I've ever really seen any of them like side by side. I don't really know how tall they are in a general sense. Bakunin looked like a big guy, though. I gotta say, Bakunin looks big. Like, is he big? Let's go find out. Let's go find out. Bakunin height. Why is that so hard to find? Huh. Yeah, I can't seem to find his height. Yeah, anyway, I'm going with Bakunin. Yep, there we go. Bakunin. There's your answer. Oh, okay, here we go. It's the Vaush question. Will you go on Vaush's stream to debate him on anarchism and stuff eventually? Probably not. I'm not sure that it would really be valuable. I mean, people could argue maybe it's valuable in bringing others in. I'm really concerned on whether it would actually be a productive and constructive debate. I am not certain that it will be. Truthfully, I just don't even know if it would be worth it. I mean, I've answered this many times. I think that it would probably end up two things I can imagine happen. Either we just talk and he agrees with me, and then it's like, well, I don't understand why you also agreed with an authoritarian leftist when you spoke with them about everything. But the other option is that we just get into a big argument. I'm very doubtful that it will be productive. Maybe I'm wrong, but I doubt it will be productive. Also, I'm pretty sure somebody showed a message in Vaush's Discord server that said he doesn't even debate leftists anymore. Like, if you are a leftist and you ask to debate Vaush, the moderators just filter you out of the queue. It's like not even a thing. Like, Zoe is the only, I think, one of the last leftists he even debated. So I honestly, that's the answer to the question. Let's see here. How's my day been? Today's been pretty good. Yeah, today's been pretty good. Do you believe in free will? If not, does your lack of belief hold any weight on your political beliefs? No, I don't believe in free will, especially not sort of a libertarian free will as the Enlightenment, right? This idea, the ability to have chosen otherwise kind of thing. There is no such thing as an ability to choose otherwise. There's only one reality. We are living in it. This is the one where you chose an action. That's the action you chose. There's no way you could go back to that moment and press play again, and it would turn out another way. So I'm a hard determinist. Does it affect my political beliefs? I mean, honestly, not to a significant degree, because the truth is that the illusion of free will, the illusion of choice is so intense that pretty much makes no difference to anybody's daily life which one is true. Thoughts on egoism, and can I ever come on stream to ego pill you? My thoughts on egoism is that it is non-falsifiable. The problem with egoism is that there is no conceivable action which could be demonstrated which would ever disprove egoism. Okay. And then the problem is, well, then it's just tautological. You know, you've defined it into existence. If egoism's presupposition is that every single action is done for the benefit of self, well, how would I even demonstrate to you that wasn't the case? You know, how would I even show you an action which would demonstrate selflessness? Now, I would say it's easy, right? You just look at actions which are clearly selfless. You look at actions which hurt people, which they had to sacrifice of themselves greatly, especially maybe sacrificing their own life. And in that occasion, it's very difficult to say that they did that for their own self-interest. They clearly did not. They're dead. Right? I just don't see how you can argue that a person like diving on a grenade and having their guts shredded open by a grenade and dying from it is doing it for their own self-interest. I think, but that's the thing. I've had egoists try to tell me, no, you do, because in that moment you're trying to feel good that you're trying to save people, and then that you're acting because you want to feel good about saving people. And it's like, so what you're saying is there's literally not a conceivable example I could give you that would demonstrate that a person was acting selflessly. Well, it sounds like a tautology. It sounds like you've just defined it into existence. Diode, I see what you're saying in chat, and it actually is its supposition. I mean, that's the problem. There's no conceivable demonstration that would show otherwise. And I've tried it. I've talked with lots of egoists, and it's circular. It's a circular argument. The actual argument that is clearly true is some actions are selfish and some actions are selfless. They're in varying degrees. It's on a scale. People can act selflessly. We're a species that is programmed to be hyper empathetic. Our limbic system is built to become attuned to other people's needs and to act in interests of other people's needs and not our own in a significant way. So I don't think that egoism matches science. I think that egoism is refuted by modern neurological science. Why am I a syndicalism enjoyer? Because revolutionary trade unionism is cool. It's just not enough. It's insufficient. What's your opinion of guerrilla warfare and insurgencies as a strategy of revolution? And do you think anarchism would create the shadow government required for it to succeed? Guerrilla warfare and insurgencies. Yeah, well, I mean, those things are useful. You're going to need them. You're going to need guerrilla warfare. You're going to need insurgency. It seems to me like it's not a strategy of revolution. It's like a necessary component to ever succeeding in revolution. I don't know about a shadow government, but I mean, if you're just talking about needing some coordinating structure, as I've laid out, we need confederations of councils that control militias. So yeah, I mean, I advocate insurrection and prefiguration. I think you got to combine them together. What are your thoughts on post-structuralism and post-anarchism? I won't pretend to be educated enough on either of those to lay out an opinion. I will say mostly post-structuralism, because that one seems at least somewhat complicated. And as I've read about it, it seems like the subject is challenging. Post-anarchism, I find that I guess there's two different conceptions here. Okay. I've heard two different answers for why post-anarchism is called post-anarchism. Explanation number one, it is post-anarchism. It sees itself as coming after anarchism in the same way as like post-leftism, as I understand it. The other one I've heard is that it is anarchism based in postmodernism. The truth is that whichever one it is, I'm not down with it. It's cool. The critiques are probably valuable. Postmodernism, usually the critiques are valuable, but it's a fully deconstructive method. It has almost no constructive impulse. And to me, what makes our anarchism valuable is that it is both a constructive and a deconstructive impulse. I think that purely deconstructive impulses are nearly useless by themselves. And once again, I believe that they are self-refuting. So if our problem with anarchism was that we want to inject more postmodernist deconstruction into it, it's like anarchism has got enough deconstruction. I mean, you've probably got valid critiques, and I've heard valid critiques that call themselves post-anarchist, but anarchism is inherently must be a combination of the constructive and the deconstructive impulse. The other arguments I've heard, but these are all kind of in the same line with like post-leftism in general when I hear about it, is that people say anarchism was this very particular way of seeing things. Now, the reason I'm not an anarchist is because of these critiques, but what they're really presenting are just things that most anarchists have changed their minds on, right? So it's kind of like Murray Bookchin criticizing anarchism by saying that it was like narrowly workerist and very individualist. Well, it's like in the 80s it was, like that was true in the 80s. Historically, there's been a lot of workerism in the anarchist movement, but does anarchism have to be workerist? Does anarchism have to be, economically reductionist? I would say no. right? Anarchism in its conceptual framework really contains the ability to broaden its conceptions, broaden its praxis, to deepen its analysis of hierarchies of power and privilege. So I really don't think it's necessary that we consider anarchism as being narrowly workerist or individualist. So, but as I understand it, post-anarchists want to be more individualist, which is not me at all. So let's see here. Thoughts on gender abolition and civilization. Gender abolition is a challenging topic because gender is an amazingly challenging topic. I will not weigh in too deeply on that one. I need to read more queer theory. But civilization, I would say, given what I have heard, the arguments that I've heard, I'm post-civ, not anti-civ. I am much closer to like social ecology than I am to, I don't believe, it kind of depends on how you define civilization, right? If the way you define civilization is like, you know, densely packed urban areas, you know, which are like made into grid structures, like James C. Scott sort of conceives, or how Mumford sees them as the enacting of machine logic into the organization of human settlements. Like, if that's how you see civilization, then probably a lot of people are anti-civ, you know? But if what you see as civilization is kind of something a lot bigger than that, right? And you see how it's actually just the accumulation of a bunch of tools and infrastructure that could possibly be applied in one way or another. The tools themselves are not all neutral, but a lot of them have some flexibility in how they could be applied. That's more my perspective. Let's see here. Which anarchist project, historical or contemporary, is the one you most admire? I mean, really, it's for me, the CNTFAI has the most, explicitly anarchist, that is, has the most for us to like learn from as a revolutionary praxis. But the projects which most inspire me these days are the Zapatistas and Rojava, neither of which are explicitly anarchist, but both are anarchistic, you might say. I have a lot of anarchist elements to them, a lot of elements that anarchists have long been suggesting. And might I add, also achieving their goals through very anarchist methods. So those for me are the big ones. Rant about social ecology, please. I need to be educated. Oh, Diode. Also, have you read any individualist anarchist stuff? If so, what did you think? Right. Yeah, I kind of answered some of that. But social ecology is the notion that humans are fundamentally intertwined with the ecology as opposed to this conception that humanity stands above the ecology, or that that the fundamental struggle of life for humans is not human against human, but instead human against nature, and that every human must pull the burden towards freeing ourselves from a struggle against nature. That's the old Enlightenment era conception for a lot of those Enlightenment era thinkers. Social ecology says, no. It is neither man against man nor man against nature. Instead, man we have arisen from nature as it in its organic form, in a way that did not have this degree of intentionality as in humanity. And the problems of our interaction with the environment, the problems of the damage of the ecologies is completely inextricable from the domination within our hierarchical structures as a society. Okay, so that is to say, the domination of man over nature is mirrored in the domination of man over man. This is how it's often said, right? So basically, the idea is you will never actually change humanity's a fundamental interaction with the ecology so long as the hierarchical structures that reify domination in humanity remain. Because those are the structures that are damaging the ecology. This is not just a fully, you can't just neutralize those structures. You can't just take those structures and then turn them against their fundamental purpose. As I said in Power, the hierarchical structure of power is a death-oriented mentality. It fundamentally conceives that which is below must be subjugated. It fundamentally conceives that there is a hierarchy of things, that there are things that are better and worse than others, that there is a cycle of domination. That is not what is actually happening in the ecology. The ecology is a complex, complementary environment. There are not graders and lessers. Everything serves a purpose. The ecology is delicately interconnected in much of it in a highly horizontal sense. So what Bookchin is saying is that the only way we will ever return to a state of ecological sustainability is if we destroy the structures of hierarchy as we have formed them in society, because those are the very structures which separated us from the ecological harmony that we can indeed find. And he sees social ecology as a criticism of environmentalism, because environmentalism says it just wants to make a pact between humanity and nature. Okay, it just wants a ceasefire, as you might say. Okay, environmentalism just wants a ceasefire. It just wants us to stop damaging nature. No, Bookchin says social ecology is the conception that humanity must become once more intertwined with nature. It's not a ceasefire. It's not a pact. It is a reintegration of the two. So that's my best summary as my current knowledge of Bookchin. And then, you've already seen me talk about individualist anarchism at least a little bit tonight. If not some degree of electoralism, say along the lines of Stacey Abrams, what will keep, org fair fight, what will keep the power of the state out of the hands of the next fascists? Yeah, as I said, I think that's the job of the social democrats. You're never going to get rid of the social democratic constituency, so don't worry about that. Just let them do what they're going to do. They're gonna worry about electoralism and all of that. We need to build the structures that are going to save us when the fascists inevitably get more power, when the state inevitably becomes more suppressive, when all of these people that keep getting elected inevitably collude with the state, inevitably allow it to expand its strength. So it seems to me, let the social democrats worry about that. We need more people building dual power. What are your thoughts on intervention in regional like Rojava, in a region like Rojava? I assume is what that means. Should states support them militarily like before Trump pulled out, or should support be more of a civilian character? I mean, obviously we'd prefer for support to be more of a civilian character. Intervention in Rojava, I mean, I would say right now, I don't want any more intervention in Rojava. People need to stay out of Rojava's affairs. That being said, it's complicated. Rojava is in an extremely challenging position. They have to make deals with a lot of really terrible people. And might I say, so far they've done a very good job, and much better than authoritarian leftists typically do. Authoritarian leftists will make any old bargain they want with absolutely the worst, most terrible people on earth and then explain it away. So yeah, Rojava's in a challenging situation. They're doing the best they can. It's not perfect. They've made some mistakes, but also some things considered mistakes I do not think are mistakes. I would like to see a larger flood of civilians or foreign fighters into the area, obviously. Yeah, I'm not going to pass judgments on them. They're doing what they need to do. How would you introduce anarchist ideas in a way that doesn't scare people away? I mean, you should just start with the fundamental precepts, right? The fundamental precepts is that the anarchist desires a freedom from systems of obedience and control, right? This desire, humans have a fundamental desire for freedom. Humans don't want to be disciplinized, right? So what you need to do is you need to remind them that these systems of control are what are bringing them a great deal of misery. And then you need to join together this analysis. And this takes a long time. Okay, this is a gradual process, but you need to plant the seeds that you hope will grow into this. And that is, you need to pick out how hierarchies of power are making their lives worse. And then you need to help them understand how that's not a problem of an individual hierarchy. That is a problem of every hierarchy. You need to help them understand how what their issue is there is the issue everywhere, so that they will understand that this analysis is more broad, is more expansive, that it encompasses far more than just the opposition to their particular hierarchy, right? You need to help them understand that the true unity of the oppressed is in opposing all hierarchies of power and privilege. Thoughts on Bordiga? Bordiga's like, why is he even in this? I don't even understand why he's in the same group of people as Panicoke. Like, that doesn't even make sense to me. I read Bordiga and it's like, this bro is more authoritarian than Lenin. And then I read Panicoke and I'm like, this guy's basically an anarchist. How did those get grouped together? What? Somebody can inform me on that. I'll just let you all teach me or something. Did spiffing Brit's advice work? It does not appear to have. It didn't really make any difference. Will I retweet your latest video? I'll watch it and then maybe I'll retweet it. But I don't retweet things that I don't watch. So I'll have to give it a watch before I decide on that. Anyway, wow. Okay. That took an hour and 25 minutes to answer all of the Twitter questions. They are now answered. I mean, I know you guys have been saying all kinds of stuff in here, but I haven't even seen half of what it was. Yeah, there's so much stuff in here. Okay, like this one. What do you think of David Graeber? David Graeber is fantastic. I miss him. I cried when he died. Yep. Debt is an excellent book. Everybody should read Debt. It's very important, I think. It explains that markets and commodities and money and all of that, the history is even more complex than Marxists have ever imagined. It's very, very complicated. Who's my favorite visual artist? I don't know. I haven't thought about it in years. It used to be Hiroaki Samura, who is a penciler, a Japanese manga artist. I still really like him. Recommendations for queer theory? No, I'm not the right person. Other people would be. I want to read more queer theory, but I know others are probably going to be a much better resource on that. What do you think of unity? What do you think of unity? Left-wing market anarchists, etc., like folks at the Center for Stateless Society. I mean, I don't think that there is no unified project to be had, but it should be said that there are going to be some serious distinctions to be had between market anarchists and committed anarcho-communists. That being said, is there places we can cooperate? I would say, yeah. I mean, I've laid out how in constructing the revolution, we want to be using council confederated cooperative structures. I'm sure left-wing market anarchists would be down for confederated cooperative structures. So yeah, they can help. I just hope that they wouldn't ever pump the brakes as we were attempting to abolish market relations. My least favorite historical anarchist. I'm sure there's somebody I'm missing right now. Yeah, I mean, nobody's coming to mind. I'm not sure if there's somebody that I have thought of before and can't remember. Yeah, I'm not really sure. I wouldn't say anything on that one. What are your thoughts on gateway hierarchies? That is, once you accept one hierarchy as natural and inevitable, it is easier to accept. Whoa, the whole chat just reloaded. Whoa, where is it? It is natural and inevitable. It is easier to accept them all. Yeah, I think there's some truth to that. I I don't know if it's like that's the exact process that is happening, but yeah, I mean, I would say it's definitely the case that there is this kind of hierarcho-realism that is developed by instituting hierarchies throughout your life over and over and over. First, you are under the hierarchy of the family, and you're in an animal exploitative hierarchy from the day you are born, and then you go to the school hierarchy, and then you leave school and go into the corporate hierarchy, and then and so on and so on. And your control over society is dominated by the representative republic and the hierarchy. It's like, yeah, your life is pervaded by authoritarian notions. Of course, it's going to make it easier to, once you've seen it happen over and over and over, to be told the lie of meritocracy, to be told the lie of hierarchies of competency, to believe that that's real. Like to think that's a thing, and like, oh yeah, of course, hierarchies of, it's very rare to be able to assemble a hierarchy of competence. There has to be a very clear skill with a very clear goal to ever do that. Yvonne Seal. Okay. Toward the queerest insurrection of the generation. You can find that. Okay. Daniel, what are some of the best projects going on that you know of? What institution is best suited to get us through a revolutionary juncture? Who, if anyone, is doing this? The best, I've already said internationally, I've already said Rojava and the Zapatistas are probably the most worth looking at. But insofar as we're talking about other organizations, there are people all over Earth right now that are beginning to create dual power organizations. It should be said, one of the ones that looks like it is doing the best at understanding where we are at on the popular education front, understanding that we are at that stage where we're still making the soil more fertile. Black Socialists of America is doing an excellent job. If you're talking about in a broad sense, which orgs should people look towards, I would say the two orgs, which I would say at the top, I would say Black Rose. If you're an anarchist, go try to join Black Rose. If you don't have a local, see if you have a symbiosis local, which may be called cooperation something. Okay. And that'll be like social ecologist, like Bookchin. If you don't have that, see if you have an IWW. If you don't have an IWW, see if there's a DSA Libertarian Socialist Caucus. All of these kind of are in descending order, doing the program at hand. Right. And so I would say if you can get involved in any of those orgs, they're worthwhile in descending order, right? Of course, there's affinity groups, anarchist affinity groups in every city doing great work. If you can find your local mutual aid organizations, or in fact, if you have like a local Food Not Bombs, you may be able to find some other anarchists in your area. Try to find where there are food sovereignty, mutual aid, dual power projects, and try to help with those. You can find affinity groups working on those in all kinds of different cities. Thoughts on national liberation. That is a subject that has to be approached very delicately, because we have to discuss what is meant by a nation. We have to talk about the history of different kinds of precepts of nationalism being used and what their outcomes were. And yeah, we have to understand what is meant by nation by the people who say it first. Oh my God, chat just reloaded again. Okay, do you think it would be an area of concern that local councils in an anarchist society would grant their powers to higher governing bodies recreating the state? It could happen, but I advocate that anarchist society it always has a sort of a default directly democratic basis. That is to say, even if you delegate some sort of power, that power can always just be revoked. And once it's revoked, you don't just elect a guy to replace the previous one. It is revoked and it returns to base level directly democratic decision making. So like, if my count, or if these confederation of councils like delegated some administration confederation, right? And that administration confederation is starting to do some bad stuff with its delegation. People do not like how it's starting to control things. They can just literally abolish that organization and then take on the duties of that administration for themselves until they either choose to delegate out some of the administrative duties again, or mix and match, or, restructure the delegation, or just keep the administrative duties to themselves. But I think the key is that you never structure in anything that takes a, they're always, you have to always be able to, it says my connection is unstable, so I might be lagging out. I hope I'm not. Let's see, is my phone on the internet? Yes, it is. Okay, maybe that'll help a little. Cool, there we go. Yeah, I think the key is that it always has to default back to the control by the masses. Even if control is not in the immediate term sense in the hands of the masses, it needs to always be able to return to them if they revoke that position of power. I think that's really the key in preventing the re-arising of the state. Anarcho-Pill, thoughts on my conversation and debate with SDL? I mean, you did a really good job. I thought you did an excellent job in that debate. I'm not sure. I don't know how convincing it's going to be to his followers, because it's often very difficult to convince somebody's followers. But I think that you made very strong arguments. I would recommend people watch the debate between Anarcho-Pill and Socialism Done Left. By the way, I'm scrolling through so many messages. You're going to probably have to at me to get my attention on these. Do you have a favorite author, anarchist or otherwise? My favorite authors have changed over the years, but I really like Cormac McCarthy. I really like Frank Herbert. I really like George Orwell. I mean, and that's just fiction. If we're talking about fiction, I really like Philip K. Dick. Yeah. Those are the fiction authors I like. If you're talking nonfiction, I think probably everybody knows I like Rudolph Rocker, Malatesta, Bookchin, Where do you see there is a gap in theory right now? I don't know. I haven't really thought about it too much, but what I would say is maybe doing what I'm kind of working on is a more deep systems analytical approach to anarchism, such that I'm kind of building a new analytical foundation that has its own ontology and its own epistemology, and it builds layer by layer until it reproduces all of the conclusions of anarchism, but it does it sort of through the lens of ecology and complex systems analysis. So that's what I'm doing. I view that as the opening, but it's hard for me to, say that's just my opinion. I think that I'm more of an analytical sort, What is love? Wow. Well, I've been hearing about this great book called The General Theory of Love. And the general theory of love argues that love is very much about something called limbic resonance, which is to say, when two people, their limbic systems sort of get aligned in a way to where they start to almost like reduce the divisions between them, such they begin to understand the other one in an almost a neurological sense, that they have become synced. So I think that's part of love, but also just the continual act of reinforcement, the willingness to suffer and sacrifice for others, the desire to attain a healthy homeostatic unity. There we go. That's my overarching beliefs about what love is. I could get into more detail, but I'm not answering any more Vaush questions. I'm done. What is your view on letting religious people, churches, communities, and so on build communes and other forms of living? How should an anarchist society deal with religious liberty? I personally am pretty anti-theist overall. And I would say that an anarchist society must allow people their religious freedom, and that if religious communities want to make their own communes and churches and all of that, that they should be allowed to do so, even if they think really absurd things, so long as their beliefs do not literally constitute violence. Like, for example, fascism constitutes violence. They should be allowed to create their communities and govern their communes as they desire, as an autonomous people. They should be part of the confederations, I would hope, but yeah. How much anarchist history have you read, and how important is it to anarchist praxis? It's hard, it's hard for me to qualify how much have I read. It's like, a considerable amount. Like a considerable amount. I've read a lot about CNTFAI. I've read about the Ukraine to some degree. I've read about the KPAM a little bit. I've read about a variety of other movements in sort of like a skimming way. But how valuable is it to praxis? Pretty valuable, honestly. Reading about the CNTFAI and seeing that they actually did like anarchist electoralism and then seeing how bad it backfired is one of the reasons why I'm just completely done with electoral politics. I do not think that it has utility. Anarchists thought they could do entryism and could turn the government against itself, and it turns out the government turned those anarchists against their own movement. Oh God, chat just reloaded again. Views on Howard Zinn. Love Howard Zinn. Howard Zinn was a very early read for me. I read People's History, or rather I skimmed People's History and kind of understood a substantial portion of it, like way back in the Occupy days. But I didn't really read it and like really think about it and contextualize it well until a few years ago. And it's very important. It's an important book. I think everybody really should read A People's History of the United States. Oh, sorry, you asked about Howard Zinn and I talked about A People's History. That's not the only thing he's done, but everybody should read A People's History of the United States. It's a very good foundational text. It's not going to give you all of the knowledge you need to understand the various oppressed people's perspectives in the United States and throughout its history, but it'll at least give you a good baseline. And it'll help you a lot in understanding different eras of history when you read about them afterwards. What would be your opinion on autonomism and compositionist Marxism? Now, I don't know anything about compositionist Marxism. I assume that's like analogous to some degree with autonomism. My understanding of autonomism is that it is very anarchistic and just using Marxist theory. And this is so reoccurring to me. And there's nothing wrong with that. I'm glad that they've come to some very anarchist conclusions. I like that they're emphasizing autonomy. This is very important. I like that they're using more bottom-up structures. It just kind of gets on my nerves how everybody thinks they have been so clever when they discover these things that anarchists were saying in like the fucking 1890s. Like that just it gets a little tiring. It's like, I would have been great if you guys would have just like read that in the 1890s instead of straw manning anarchists. But anyway, no, I'm done with that rant. No problems with the autonomists, but I don't know a huge amount about them. So maybe I would have criticisms if I read more, but yeah. Somebody says, I'd like to see more theory about decentralized planning. Yeah, I agree. And one place you can look, if just it may interest you, even if you disagree with him, is Michael Albert's participatory economics. It's basically a possible model for anarcho-communism. Even if you don't end up agreeing with it, it's a good starting place to start having discussions. Electoralism is a dead end, but should anarchists vote? Are anarchists going against their principles if they do vote? Yeah, I don't consider voting electoralism. If you want to vote, go for it. I don't care. I mean, there's even times where it's to the benefit of people, right? Like, for example, when ballot initiatives are taking place, like in my state, there was the last two big elections. The last one, or no, not the last two, but there have been ballot initiatives. One that made it to where we could serve alcohol in grocery stores and a bunch of other things, which was useful. And one that legalized medical marijuana in the state of Oklahoma, or should I say cannabis, which is valuable as well. Those are good things. And if you wanted to get out and vote for those, I would understand. What I would just say, don't get involved in people's campaigns. Don't go door knock for candidates. If that is something you're going to spend the energy to do, don't spend that energy to go help build dual power projects. You are better off joining Food Not Bombs and serving food to people than you are knocking doors for any politician. So yeah, I don't think voting is against anarchist principles. Voting doesn't really have any, not voting doesn't do anything for any particular power structure. It does nothing. And I mean, don't get me wrong, if you don't have time to vote, I would say it's not a big deal either, you know? And there's lots of people where it's very challenging to vote, and it's been made very difficult for them to do so. I think vote shaming is silly. But I think shaming people for voting wrong is silly, but also shaming people for voting is silly, because who cares? Like, as long as they're not out wasting weeks of their life, trying to get some council member elected or something, then who really cares? Yeah, go vote, whatever. I don't think it has any countervailing notion to anarchism. Harrison's question. Oh, I'm only looking through what should one do in their look. Oh, wow, I didn't even see this. What the dang, I missed some stuff. Okay, what should someone do when their local anarchist scene is full of bad people? I'm disabled, so my local IWW turned me away, and my local Food Not Bombs is a person who re-traumatized me. Wow, that is like unfortunate, and I'm sorry to hear that. Obviously I can't tell you how to fix people who fundamentally have bad principles or are harmful to you, and I wouldn't ask you to tolerate being in their presence either, if they're being exclusionary and they're being clearly very inconsiderate, and I wouldn't advocate that you organize them with them if you don't want to. But I would also wonder if indeed you could have discussions with people in these situations. If you've already had discussions with them and they have still been very unreceptive, I would say don't worry yourself about it. And what might be best is for then you to find other people who will also feel turned away by these organizations, and to build your own organization, to make an affinity group, or to even make a new formal org. Because if indeed these people are acting this way, then there will probably be others who've experienced this problem. And those of you who have experienced this should get together and make an org that is not going to have this particular problem. And hopefully it will be a better org, because it will be one that understands this new nuance. And those other orgs will be worse off for having not considered your challenges and considered how they might have hurt you and the damage they might have done. But I would say in a general sense that we would hope to fix this by having robust grievance processes, right? But I think that a lot of grievance processes are quite toothless in a lot of organizations. So, Night Raining Base. Would it be worth it to join lib or dim sock movements like the Sunrise Movement to try to bring radical ideas, or is it a dead end? I don't think it's a dead end at all. In fact, one of the main features of Especefismo, which I've been advocating, is what is called social insertion, which is in fact the very notion that even though you should be part of some sort of home org, which is a specifically anarchist organization, which is why I advocate people join like Black Rose, it also advocates that you do social insertion in other organizations as to do precisely what you've said. And in fact, what I would like to say is that over the last 10 years, I've been doing social insertion in various orgs. Right. I get into the org. I figure out what it is that they're doing. I ask if I want to be involved in it. I try to maybe nudge them toward more anarchist or libertarian socialist ideas and organizing methods. And this has had great success. Like when I got involved with my local DSA way back in like 2016 or something, they were essentially writing a new charter, and I was able to put in place consensus structures because I was involved in it. So then that means that the DSA now has General Assembly consensus structures built into it because I went and socially inserted into the DSA. And so, yeah, it can have extraordinary value. I would say just don't get really like overly attached, right? Don't make it to where you like absolutely have to like stick around if you're noticing you're not getting traction, right? But if you can get something done, if you can bring more radical ideas to people, I highly advocate that you socially insert into those organizations and do so. If you would like to forward a critique and explanation of autonomism to me, go for it. Yeah, on Twitter is fine. How much wood would a woodchuck chuck if a woodchuck could chuck wood? A lot, I guess. I saw somebody saying black rose is primarily in America. Yeah, that's true, but they are, I think they're also in the UK, if I recall correctly. Cool. I don't know how much longer I'm going to do this. I never plan ahead. Truly. I am irresponsible. I never even know how long I'm going to do these streams. Can you say Irish wrist? No, apparently not. Irish wristwatch. That's weird. Irish wristwatch. Do you think an anarchist society in a poor developing area can defend itself from a large-scale, aggressive Western imperialist attempt to destroy it, like Cuba did? Yeah, I mean, if they're in the same situation as Cuba, if the anarchists can put together the confederated structures and the confederated militias with the same number of people, then they can do whatever Cuba did. I don't think centralized structures are more efficient. I think that really what is needed in a lot of these projects is just greater numbers, and we have to smash the state. I think that there cannot be this thing where we just sit around and hope to cooperate while the state is around. It has to be smashed as soon as we can, or rather, as soon as the rupture comes, the state has to be smashed, and it cannot be replaced by a state. So yeah, I don't think Cuba did anything qualitatively or quantitatively that an anarchist society could not do. Is arming the homeless praxis? It can be. I never plan ahead. Truly, I am irresponsible, relatable, and based anarcho-nihilist moment. True. Yes. Here I am. This is a messianic time. I'm living only in the present. Do you ever worry about racist voluntary militias acting as white supremacists, just as some neighborhood watches have? Yes, which is why I've said that you absolutely have to, you cannot just create militias without council structures. You cannot just create cooperatives without council structures. They must be integrated with mechanisms of direct community control. I cannot emphasize this enough, okay? These bodies are not revolutionary by themselves. A militia by itself is not revolutionary. A cooperative by itself is not revolutionary. But a cooperative confederated to a council has some revolutionary potential. A militia confederated to a council has some revolutionary potential. And here's the thing, the militias need to be controlled by the very communities that they are in, okay? So if I create a militia that is in the neighborhood next door, that militia needs to be controlled by the people in the neighborhood next door. It cannot be that some other neighborhood has a council and that controls the militia in this neighborhood over here. That's basically like small scale imperialism almost, right? Or not literally, but you get what I'm saying. You know, it's like a small scale project of aggression, right? So, you know, if you're a white militia well then you need, or if you're a militia of people in like the suburbs, well then you need to be building councils in those suburban areas where the people in the militia are to govern the militia. Okay. Not, and if they go and, they start policing some other area, right? Like in this white supremacist example, well, then they need to be accountable to the area they're in. There need to be councils in those areas as well. So in other words, there just need to be councils everywhere. There needs to be councils and confederations of councils, and the militias need to be controlled by the councils. And I've laid out this structure in Constructing the Revolution. So do you play video games? And if so, what have you been playing lately? Actually, I used to play a lot of video games. During college, I started playing a lot less, and I haven't picked them back up because my computer has been getting older and older. But actually, today, the processor arrived, and now I can actually build my new computer. So probably tomorrow at some point, maybe tomorrow evening or maybe early in the day, I'm going to be building a new computer, and then I will be playing some video games. And one of them is probably going to be Mountain Blade Bannerlord, because I really like Mountain Blade. What are your thoughts on or experience with anarcho-hacktivism? Such as Hispagados. I don't know anything about Hispagados, but like anarcho-hacktivism sounds good to me in a general sense. It kind of fits into the framework of what I said in Constructing the Revolution about intelligence pods. So it can be good, but once again, it absolutely must be integrated with a council structure. Like you cannot just create these bodies of power by themselves that are not accountable. That's not good. These orgs will betray you if you do that. You have to have some mechanism to control them. Daniel, yeah, that's true. Yes, Chaz failed to democratize. They are not a very good example of anarchist praxis. They were far too informal, and that informality made them very easy to destroy. What's my favorite anime? Easy, Cowboy Bebop. Cowboy Bebop is a masterpiece. How do we prevent communities from oppressing marginalized groups? Say a conservative community oppressing LGBTQ and non-binary people. Well, I mean, it kind of depends on the mechanism that they are using. So if they are being violent, you need to start making militias, right? You need to start creating councils and then militias based on those councils. You need to start creating cop watch groups. You need to, you need to have like a line people can call such that they can call the militia and they can get protected if someone is trying to hurt them. There's fucking Nazis out in my front lawn burning crosses or whatever, right? Like, that needs to, if there's actual violence, like active violence being perpetuated in these situations, you need to create a body which can resist active violence. Now, if what you're talking about is a more passive, we would say all racism is violent, but, a less like a threat of bodily harm sort of racism, where it's just like, discrimination in workplaces and people being racist. Well, you're going to need to do more. You're going to do education programs, in which case like spread like anarchism and the Black Revolution, for example. And you're also going to be needing to create groups which can place pressures on the institutions which are doing those things. So it's all about creating power for the people and then exerting power on other entities. We discussed this a bit before, but is there any potential for cryptocurrency as counter economics? I mean, there may be like some like sort of vague potential insofar as that the blockchain seems like a really interesting idea that has some promise. As far as the actual cryptocurrency itself, I think maybe it could be used to launder money for the militias and for the intelligence pods. That could be very useful. We could probably also create some personal cryptocurrency. I've heard about some example where like some anarchist, I think it was like in Spain or something, like robbed a shit ton of banks and then created like a crypto, and they couldn't get it back because it had been like invested or something like this. So like this story exists. Like it's clear there's some avenues, but I wouldn't ever get anybody like on that train in some significant way, like, oh man, anarchist cryptocurrency tactics, it's like, but could it serve some purpose? 100%. Yeah, clearly. Just as far as laundering money, it seems pretty clear. Oh, did I say laundering money? I don't support that. Cough, cough, illegalist praxis. Are you getting enough sleep and rest these days? In a general sense, yeah. For the last week, no, not really. I'm kind of sleep deprived, but I'm trying to get better. What are some common mistakes newbie organizers make? Probably to some degree, choosing some leader figure and then following their every word. Choosing some messiah figure in a general sense. Becoming narrowly. I mean, really, at the end of the day, it's also just a problem of how challenging it is to determine what tactics do and do not work. Figuring out, you have to do it through trial and error to some significant degree, unless you read a lot of theory and you really take it on board and use it. Yeah, I would say it's easy for new organizers to give in, to think that it is practical to be authoritarian, when in fact it's not. It's an action of self-sabotage. And another one is believing in leftist unity. Yeah, newbie organizers, I don't know why, but pretty much every newbie organizer believes in leftist unity. Okay, I believed in, yes, leftist unity. Pretty much every organizer I knew when I first started organizing, who was even relatively new, believed in leftist unity. It just seems tempting until you understand that they're not really our allies. So yeah, getting into mass orgs and then thinking that you and authoritarian leftists can form effective bonds of unity. That's a big one. Let's see. I've noticed a lot of people moving to crypto after the GME stock situation. Yeah, it's probably true. What is your opinion on market anarchism or agorism? Well, I would separate agorism. Oh, not anarcho-capitalism. Okay, yeah. I don't know about agorism that isn't anarcho-capitalist. I've only ever read about the agorist, anarcho-capitalist agorism. So, market anarchism in general. I mean, I'm skeptical of markets. The thing for me is I just don't understand why you would ever aim to get a market, right? Like, I understand and am sympathetic to arguments about markets being present in transitionary structures or during the time of rupture, especially before pending a global revolution. You're going to need some way to trade with the outside world. But I find it very peculiar that we would aim to arrive at a market structure. I find that very peculiar. If it's at all possible, we should be hoping to abolish the market, abolish commodity production, abolish wage labor. And so that's really my opinion on it. Insofar as we're talking about market anarchism as being involved in the project of transitioning towards a more robust worker ownership, a social ownership of the means of production. Yeah, I get it. But insofar as that you're telling me your goal is to arrive at the market, I just don't understand. That to me is a very poverty stricken mentality. It seems like you're really aiming low on that one. But that's my opinion. What would come back up? Thank you for keeping it honest. Please mind your sleep. Yeah, well, everybody asks, what does Anark think about this? But nobody asks, how is the Anark? Shaking my head. Anark. Yeah, that's true. Kinda. Let's see here. Leftist unity with left accelerationists, though. Not the meme, the actual. Yeah, no. I actually said, there is some aspect. Well, okay, so it's like I believe that insurrection and prefiguration need to be kind of like coordinate with one another. Like as you prefigure and get stronger, the insurrection should grow, but they should never grow faster than one another. If your prefiguration goes on for too long and you've stopped doing insurrection, then you're probably falling victim to exactly what the insurrectionists have been saying you are, which is that you're acting like a gradualist. Okay. So like the insurrectionists, this is their main critique of social anarchists. They're like, you guys keep telling us to wait and telling us to wait and telling us to wait and telling us to wait, and nothing is happening. Right. And it's like, fair enough. Yeah, that's true. That can be a problem. Even anarchists can take place in that behavior. So you should prefigure and undergo insurrection in measure to one another. Okay. But I would say just accelerationism by itself, bad idea. Bad idea. You are very likely to just invite a shit ton of suppression. And if we just insurrect without prefiguration, when a time comes for suppression, they're just going to smash us into dust. How do I feel about Dreg's video? It's like sometimes he's hilarious. Okay. But it makes me uncomfortable watching a lot of his videos, how he is platforming fascist ideologies. So yeah, I got some mixed feelings about Dreg. That's what I'll say. I got some mixed feelings, but I'll have to admit that some of his videos are funny to me. Do you have any pets? Not at the moment. But I did have 2 cats when I was with my ex-girlfriend. Oh, Diode, you're so nice to me. Insurrecto platformism, it me. How would an anarcho-communist society keep markets or black markets or some form of currency from existing? I think the only way that happens is once you have created a very broad communist economy. Okay, like you have to have actually created a broad-ranging, multi-regional, communist economy, such that, from each according to their ability, to each according to their need. You have abolished the commodity form. You have abolished wage labor. Social ownership of the means of production has taken place, but it has to have done so in a large region. Okay. So, and I say that because I think one of the real pressures that brings societies back to markets, bring them back to currency, is the pressure to evaluate their products as to trade with the outside world. The outside world is constantly pressuring them to give number values to everything inside of their economy. And by doing so, relative values are assumed by everything else. And therefore, everything kind of assumes some of its commodity nature once again. So this is why then currency is there. If commodities are present, currency will be there. If commodities plus the state, currency guaranteed. Okay. But if you can abolish the commodity form, and you can abolish the state, you can't abolish currency and markets. But it's going to be challenging to do that when we are in a global society, which is to say you're going to need much larger multi-regional supply networks. So probably there will have to be some sort of market in the transition as we build larger multi-regional confederations. What are the mistakes that Rojava has made? I only see people alluding to it. I'm a little worried that their delegation doesn't root back to the direct democracy, or rather it seems as if it is made such that there is a requirement for delegation in order for things to function. And it worries me that that's going to just devolve into representationalism, and that all they're going to do is reproduce a state. But it seems to me that is not taking place at the moment. There is not a technocratic class that is governing them, and the council structures that they have created are maintaining a bottom-up council-based form of social governance. So at the moment, I would say that my worries are not yet vindicated, and I would hope to never see them vindicated. But it is a worry that I have, that they might have created a proto-state, and only time will tell about such a thing. What current anarchist project? Oh, let's go back up. Can a market anarcho-socialist believe in Austrian School of Economics, a right-wing long on commodity production with a socialist framework? I'm not going to deep dive into that too much. It seems to me like there's some market anarchists that seem to borrow a little bit from the Austrian school, and I personally am just skeptical of trying to salvage anything from the anarcho-capitalists. It seems to me most any critique that you could find that's valuable there could probably be found elsewhere. What current anarchist projects, free zones, autonomies, dual power structures do you think deserve special attention? I mean, I've mentioned numerous times the Zapatistas in Rojava, but I'd like to emphasize the Zapatistas. They've been around for like 30 years now, and they have maintained their autonomy while the federal government has tried actively to undermine them. And the government has not only failed, the Zapatistas continue to expand and put councils in new municipalities across Mexico. So the Zapatistas are an excellent example. And I think that we should all be looking to the Zapatistas for an understanding of how to move forward, how to adapt a more libertarian socialist framework to the conditions of our circumstances, to our conditions. And understanding what they have done, because what they have done is quite exceptional. That is, to me, I think the Zapatistas are probably one of my biggest inspirations in looking at how to understand the current world and how to rethink these problems through these especially through indigenous frameworks. Chaotic, neutral, dialectical materialism, huh? One of the most perverse aspects of hierarchies is their ability to naturalize and reify themselves via ideological hegemony. How should anarchists deal with hierarchies presently invisible? I mean, that is a super challenge. It is very difficult to convey to people when they are taking place in oppressive hierarchies, because so many of them are so normalized that we've even got leftists defending many of them, even though, once again, historically, these were not controversial things to take stances against, like, the atomic family, or, the nuclear family, or coercive school structures, things like this. Like, it was just known, but it's challenging. We live in a hierarcho-realist society. So I don't know. You might say that the entire project of my channel and everything, all the rhetoric I've ever been developing has been an attempt to answer that question. Let's see. Council communism or libertarian Marxism? Oh, if I had to choose between them, I don't know. It seems to me that council communism is a kind of libertarian Marxism. I don't know. I won't pretend to understand the distinctions well enough there. But it seems to me that libertarian council communism would be a kind of libertarian Marxism. Do you think small-scale production along the lines of small is beautiful, localist economies could have a place in an anarchist society? Yeah. Certainly. Mm-hmm. Absolutely. I mean, it seems to me like it will be integral to the process, in fact. Whether it will be the only mechanism, that's another matter. I don't know. But it seems to me that it will be a very, very important mechanism to reorganizing the economy. Localism is also a method to make decentralization more possible. So, yeah. I mean, localism is also just more socially ecological, right? It's also a more ecological approach. When people know more about the things that are taking place, when they have the ability to actually see the processes playing out, they also have the ability to administer them more effectively, because they actually know what is taking place. They're interacting with the process of administration, of production, and so on. So, yeah, definitely. I think the localist economy will be integral. Whether it's the only mechanism, I don't know. I think there will probably be some more distributed planning, right? But or a wide scale planning. But I think that we would hope to have the majority of the planning be small scale. What are your thoughts on the Smangus Christian anarchists of Taiwan? As you can see by the fact I thought maybe that was said Smangus or Smunk, I don't know. Then I don't know anything right about them. That's what that boils down to. I've heard about Christian anarchists in Taiwan, but I do not know anything about them really. What society would you rather choose to live in, libertarian Marxism or Bookchin communalism? 100% Bookchin communalism. Bookchin's critiques of Marxism generally appear to be true, which is that it is very economically reductionist. It appears to be very workerist. Even if you don't want to read that into Marx, or you want to say that Marx left room open for that not to be the case, and that would be fair. I could take such a position to be acceptable. Bookchin is really a more modern understanding of the problems at hand. If I were to recommend somebody read a book that would help them actually truly understand the full scope of the problem, I think Ecology of Freedom would be more valuable than Capital. But it's not to say I wouldn't also recommend Capital. Capital is excellent. If you just want to understand worker exploitation under capitalism, but you don't want to understand everything else, read Capital. But if you want to understand everything all at once to some degree, Ecology of Freedom is probably a much better place to start. Can council structures ever be detrimental to progress? For example, during Occupy, some people felt like they could not act outside of the General Assembly. I don't know who thought that. Anybody could. In my situation, I never saw anybody that couldn't act outside the General Assembly. The General Assembly didn't demand that you it wanted report backs most of the time, but it didn't tell you couldn't do something, or rather, if it did, that was up to your General Assembly. But free association is always, going to be an important part of any council building project. So yeah, I mean, I guess, I'm not saying every council is going to be, completely aware of every problem in society and make all the right decisions, but it seems to me like it's better to have formal organization and to have some of these problems than to have no formal organization and get very little done. Your opinion on Medicare for all. If social democrats can achieve more social programs, that is good. I would think Medicare for all would be a benefit to people. I would really like to have some health care. I have seen the damage that not having health care does to human beings firsthand. Yes, Medicare for all is good, but it's coming to the point now where I'm looking at a death machine that is accelerating toward a concrete wall. And it's like, man, we're going to need a lot more than Medicare for all when this thing explodes, right? Like, I'm not saying don't try to get Medicare for all. I'm glad the Social Democrats are working on it, but there are way bigger problems now. Like, it's getting worse and worse. Have I ever considered setting up a Discord server for the channel? I have a Discord server for the channel. Last time somebody asked that, I linked it in the chat and got a massive flood of people, and I'm trying to avoid doing that again. So here's what I will do. If you would like to be invited to the Discord channel, I would like you to send me a direct message on Twitter, and then I will give you an invite. Okay? I'm not going to post it in the chat again. That was disastrous last time, or rather, it wasn't that bad, but it was a huge hassle. Let's see here. Do you think? Oh, is that? Do you think that the existence of the welfare state impedes anarchists, but also community social functions by providing an alternative to necessity of necessity-based building of mutual aid networks? In a technical sense, the answer is probably yes, but I would still not say that they shouldn't be built, because we should never want to push people into building dual power by making them more deprived. Okay. Number one, because we should not be hoping to increase suffering in the world. Right. But number two, because then they're just going to know that we're the culprits for their suffering. Right. Like, it's like, we're going to be over here, like, trying to sabotage building Medicare for all. And then we're like, okay, so now that you don't have healthcare, don't you think it'd be a really good idea if we made these healthcare cooperatives? And it's just like, man, how are they not going to look at you like you're a fucking douchebag, right? Like, you're an asshole. You know, you fought against Medicare for all so that you could help them build, so that you could build a mutual aid network instead. It's like, nah, that's not it. You know. Let's see. For some reason, I'm not able to DM you on Twitter. That's weird. You sure? My DMs are open. My DMs are open. You just have to send it to me. I don't know what that's about. Or maybe if you just like message on Twitter, I can, you know, if you just like tag me, like comment me or something, then I'll DM you the Discord link. But yeah, basically if you want it, you know, I'll do it after the stream is over. But yes, also anybody on the server, if anybody in here, if you guys want to coordinate to share the link, anybody who's already on the server, go for it. Anarcho-feminism or LGBTQ plus anarchism. I will not pretend to know the finer distinctions between the two. I need to read more queer anarchism. The only anarcho-feminism that I know of is Goldman, and I should read more than that to ever come to a conclusion. But it seems to me like, you know, all intersections of oppression are necessary. They have to be analyzed. Favorite Goldman text? I don't know. I read what was it? The essay compilation, the most famous essay compilation. I don't remember what it's called. But I don't remember one that was in specific that stuck out. Getting into the Discord once again, DM me on Twitter and I will give you a link, or anybody in here that is in the Discord, if they want to arrange with anybody else here to share them the invite link, go for it. But I do not want to post it in the chat again. Neo-Luddism or anarcho-primitivism? Neither. What are your opinions on post-colonial theory and how we can build upon it within anarchism? I think that's definitely something that's being done right now. I think that's like an area where you can see anarchist theories really expanding, especially as indigenous peoples are beginning to understand the coordination of their thought and anarchism. As they're starting to see, oh wow, there's a lot of our thought contained here in what these Westerners are saying. As that's taking place, you're finding that anarchism is beginning to have a much better understanding of post-colonialism, especially as anarchists are becoming interested in the Zapatistas and things like that. So yeah, it seems like an area of expansion for anarchist theory right now. Have read any xenofeminism? No, really the only feminism I've read is intersectional feminism. But I've just been reading a lot of other political theory at the moment. Let's see. How do you get to read so much? It's a mixture of reading when I have the free time, listening to audiobooks, using screen readers, all that stuff. So like I'm combining a bunch of methods together so that I'm like listening to texts very often. Like I'll be listening to theory while driving the car and in headphones while I'm at work, and then reading while I'm sitting at the computer doing other things. So I'm basically just finding ways where I can just be consuming it like all the time. Say good stuff about Malatesta, please. Malatesta is incredible. Everybody needs to read Anarchy by Malatesta. If you're looking for the primer piece to start people on for anarchism, an anarchist program is one of the best places you can start them. Malatesta is one of the most coherent, well-spoken anarchists to ever live. What is my thought on the Boogaloo movement? Do you think they're fascists or libertarian capitalists? Probably mix. It's always a mix. I mean, with these groups, it's pretty much always a mix. You've got some that dominate of one or the other, but Boogaloo boys appear to be a lot of ANCAPs, but ANCAPs always have a bunch of fascists in their midst, and fascists always have at least a few ANCAPs in their midst. That's a very active pipeline both directions, to the degree where sometimes they don't even recognize their differences very well. Like they'll recognize them at a glance sometimes, but then really not act on them. They build those alliances very seamlessly, it seems. Anarchists need to come to grips that our philosophy has been influenced by racist tropes of indigenous peoples and remedy that shortcoming. Stolen Anarchy is a good vid on this. I mean, I'll watch that video, and I think that's absolutely true. There's definitely been a lot of like noble savage stereotypes mixed in with analysis of indigenous peoples. That being said, I think if people are looking to dissolve that, one of the best places to go is Bookchin and Ojolon. And I will say that mutual aid specifically really didn't have this problem too bad. I mean, it definitely idealized and it sort of also universalized to a significant degree a lot of indigenous societies, but it also talked about the ups and downs. It talked about the features that were not perfect. So Kropotkin definitely didn't give in to the noble savage stereotype, it seems. He considered that it was a more complex matter than that, and so does Bookchin. So I think there is a lot of problems with that sort of simplistic or simplifying mentality of indigenous peoples. But I would say, in a general sense, if you are comparing it to the broader leftist canon of the time, that it was actually not nearly as bad as the contemporaries that were doing those same things, or really that, but in overdrive. The noble savage stereotype, that is, like Marx's primitive communism, quote unquote. You're all my little pog champs. There you go. Clip that, use it, meme it. Do we have to DM you on Twitter to get to the Discord? Is there a way to DM on YouTube? I don't know about how to DM on YouTube. I definitely meant Twitter. Do you think that indigenous people should let them keep and preserve their culture? I'm not sure I understand. Or do you think it's fascist to do so and apply anarchism to their society in order to achieve its goals? I'm not sure I understand. Do you think, I think what this is saying is, do I think that indigenous people should let who? Yes, Sam. Do I think that indigenous people should let who keep and preserve their culture? Fascists? I would hope not. Fascist ideology is violence. Like, no actual functional society can allow fascism to flourish. Like, fascism has to be crushed. There is no such thing as, you can't have anarchism when, like, fascists are literally trying to undermine it. I mean, you can have individual fascists, but you can't like let fascists build ethno states in your midst. That's not anarchist. It's like saying we got to let capitalists build corporations in our midst because otherwise we're oppressing them. Oh, the indigenous people keeping their culture. You're asking, should we let indigenous people keep their culture in an anarchist society? Is that what you're asking? Indigenous people should be I mean, indigenous people should obviously be able to keep their culture in an anarchist society. I mean, I would say indigenous culture would be very harmonious with anarchist society in a general sense. You know, it's also like what culture is being kept in the process. You know, if we're talking about continuing capitalism, then no. But most indigenous people, when they're saying they want to, you know, they want control over their lives again, or not saying they want to continue with the capitalist paradigm. So I guess we would just have to clarify more here. If we're talking about reclaiming sort of like the original indigenous values that constituted those old societies, the societies before colonialism, yeah, we should hope to see them expand those projects. Those projects will only enrich an anarchist society. So yeah. Yeah, I don't think that there's really a whole lot of incongruity between most. If we're talking about, oh, well, I should say, indigenous across the earth could be very different, but indigenous in the United States, North America, many of those cultures are very congruent with anarchist ideology. It depends on which ones, obviously. Some are less so, but yeah, I would say I don't think there's anything wrong with that. Once again, they seem very harmonious. Why would indigenous people preserve their culture be fascist? Yeah, I'm not sure about all that. There's not necessarily incongruous. Yeah. So-called America. Exactly. So I am going to cut the stream here in just a little while. I'll probably go for maybe another 10, 15 minutes. What are my thoughts on American exceptionalism as a concept? I mean, that it's both absurd and cancerous. Like, America is not some special fancy, country that is better than all other countries. I wouldn't say it's exceptional in any sense. And furthermore, the concept that it is really only reifies the United States' superiority complex, which it really doesn't need any more of. What's my opinion on Albert Camus and absurdism? I love Albert Camus and absurdism. The closest, my philosophy is very close to absurdism. I draw a lot from Camus. So, considering capital riots, do you think it might be beneficial if a highly skilled, targeted campaign of propaganda of the deed were taken up by capable people? Probably not. I mean, even the capital coup attempt only led to more suppression. I mean, not to say that maybe no propaganda of the deed could be effective, but it doesn't seem like propaganda of the deed is going to do a whole lot to stop that from happening again. And if anything, it looks like our example is that it failed miserably. Theirs failed miserably and just gave the government more excuse to create draconian anti-protest laws. Thoughts on Graeber? Yeah, I already mentioned Graeber. Graeber's fantastic. Debt is amazing. Everybody should read it. What are your thoughts on green anarchism, not to be confused with primitivism, if you've heard of it? Yeah, I've heard of it. I mean, I assume we're talking about going all the way back to Élisée Reclus, but I don't really I don't know what differentiates it from, say, social ecology, for example. I mean, it's probably, if I had to imagine, it's probably like what Bookchin would call environmentalism, environmentalist anarchism, probably, if I had to guess. American exceptionalism just will bring out neo-fascists into the light. Should we do the funny thing? I don't understand. Should you do the funny thing? Oh, God, I don't know what that means. What are your thoughts on post-structuralism? I've heard people say it's compatible with anarchism to the point where a synthesis of the two called post-anarchism. Yeah, I mentioned this towards the beginning of the stream. I'm not educated enough on post-structuralism to say anything. And as far as post-anarchism, I have some critiques I made earlier. How do I feel about Big Chungus? Yes. Yes. Joe Biden would pass a bill to combat ever since the Capitol riots. The Discord funny thing. The Discord. No, do not post the Discord link in this chat, please. Deleuze and Guattari. Deleuze and Guattari, I have some real problems with this sort of schizophrenic style of analysis. This notion that that we should attempt to schizophrenize our methods of epistemology and all of that. It seems to me that is not ever going to produce a coherent epistemology. It is, I understand their critique in a general sense, but yeah, I don't want to get too much into Deleuze and Guattari, but yeah. Anyway, I'm starting to get tired, kind of getting worn out. I think we're going to end it here for tonight, everybody. Okay, well, I'm going to say goodbye. See y'all later. Have a good one. It was good talking with you.